Before Elvis, John Lennon once said, there was nothing. There had never been anything like him before. Some say there never will be again.
Up here we had Elvis Presley. And down here we had everyone else.
Although it's always crowded, you still can find.
Girls were just going totally crazy, and the guys were like, wow.
Well, just take a walk down Lonely Street to Heartbreak Hotel.
Elvis was a love affair, man.
He's the biggest star that ever lived.
All the world's a stage, wrote Shakespeare, and one man in his time plays many parts, his acts being 7 ages. If so, then whatever you think of his movies, Elvis was the finest actor the world has ever seen. In the space of 42 years, he acted out every stage of human development. From a poverty-stricken childhood to king of teenage rebellion. Forced to grow up fast in the army, then made respectable as a Hollywood ham. From an unlikely comeback in his prime to washed up Vegas has-been. Finally, in death, an even bigger legend than he was in life.
There are 18,500 people in there to see Elvis, who's been dead for 40 years.
These are the 7 ages of Elvis.
It was a tragedy, but it was a success. And Shakespearean indeed.
It began in the town of Tupelo, Mississippi. America was in the grip of the Great Depression.
The only thing we have to fear is fear itself.
But despite President Roosevelt's words, there was plenty to fear in a place like Mississippi. Blacks feared lynching, and everyone feared the hunger, the disease, and the destitution that the Depression brought to the rural South. Tupelo is divided by a railroad track. Gladys and Vernon Presley lived on the wrong side of the tracks, on the edge of what was then known as the colored section of town, where poor whites and poor blacks shared the same land and the same poverty.
The thing that's most commonly underestimated about Elvis, because people can't imagine it unless they've seen it or experienced it in some fashion themselves, is how poor they were. He came from the poorest of the poor. It's hard to think who else was that poor, who was white.
Even in the racially segregated South, in some ways, the Presleys were at the very bottom of the social order.
I do think that with respectable whites and even respectable African Americans, people in the middle class, people who perceive themselves in the middle class, whether it was in the black community or the white community, they perceived the Presleys as white trash.
My name is Guy Harris, and I grew up with Elvis Presley here in East Tupelo.
Elvis Aaron Presley was born in this 2-room shack in the early hours of the 8th of January, 1935. Elvis arrived shortly after his twin brother, Jesse, who did not survive.
His brother was born dead, was stillborn, you know. He was born, Jesse was born at 4 o'clock in the morning, and he was stillborn, and my mom was in there, and the doctor was pulling off his gloves and things, and Gladys said Faye, and Faye was my mother. She said, "Don't let Dr. Hunt get out of here, because said my stomach still feels funny." She had no idea she was having twins. So Dr. Hunt got tuned up there and got to check it and said, I believe I do hear another heartbeat. Well, at 4:30, here come old Elvis, bouncing around like a ball.
The beginning of Elvis's route from rags to riches was literally around the corner.
Elvis heard a lot of music there. His mother said when they go to church, when Elvis was just a little baby in her lap, he would basically get off her lap to start singing, and so very big into the church, very early on.
It all started right yonder now in that little white church right over yonder. And they'd get to praying, and some of the people, as they were talking tongues, and they'd shout up one aisle and down the other one. I've seen that happen in that church by some of the ladies I knew from a neighborhood here, you know. They'd take us kids and put us in the choir on a Sunday night. Elvis put a lot more into it than we did. He liked to sing that old ship to us kids.
When I was a lad, an old ship was a pub.
Elvis sang Old Shep in his first public performance in October of 1945 at the annual Mississippi Fair and Dairy Show. He came fifth, winning free tickets to all the rides, the first indication of the rewards his voice might bring.
We grew up together that way.
3 years later, the Presleys left Tupelo. They headed to the city of Memphis, Tennessee, where Elvis's horizons would expand massively.
When Elvis and his family moved to Memphis, he's exposed to a whole lot of different things in terms of popular culture, in terms of the media. There was a lot more happening in terms of people diverging from what they were supposed to be doing.
I'm Blanche Jordan Scott, and I met Elvis when we were around 13, 14 years old. We were both from small towns in Mississippi, and so we ended up in Humes High School. A young Elvis Presley, skinny little old boy, but still skin smooth as silk and really good looking. And he was just pretty. He was all boy, all man. We just kind of bonded with each other, and we could talk and tell each other what was going on in our lives.
I met Elvis in 1948 at Humes High School. He and I were in the same class. We were both 12 years old, and we had a real tough music teacher. Elvis raised his hand. He said, "Miss Mormon, can I bring my guitar to class and sing?" It wasn't cool in 1948 for a 12-year-old to bring his guitar to school, but he brought it. And so he sang, and I said to myself, that kid's not bad. He's not for 12-year-olds.
The Presleys lived here in Lauderdale Courts, a government housing project reserved for white families on the lowest incomes. But Elvis began exploring the places other residents feared to tread.
Elvis would go down to East Trigg Baptist Church, which was an African-American church. This is not something that was ordinary for whites to go into the black church, but he was doing that. So I think a lot of the musical influences came there, but at the same time, it's maybe developing a sensitivity as well, a racial sensitivity that was unusual.
And Elvis was about to be introduced to another part of town where he most definitely should not be, Beale Street. Not only one of the most notorious streets in Memphis, but renowned throughout the South for its bars, brothels, and juke joints.
We were walking Beale. The black entertainers were getting up and performing. And so I got Elvis to go down there with me. And they'd get up on our lunch hours now, and we were the only white faces down there. Some of them that I worked with, they didn't like it, but we didn't care. You know, we did our own thing. They were putting on a show. They were also wearing pink shirts and silk pants. So anyway, he said, where are the guys finding these clothes? And I said, well, they're getting their clothes from Lansky's.
My name is Hal Lansky. My dad, Bernard Lansky, sold Elvis's clothes in the 50s, and Elvis shopped with us from the 50s to all the way to his death. So we're known as Clothier to the King.
When Elvis discovered Lansky's, it provided him with a distinctive look that became his trademark.
Elvis looked in the windows. He saw those red pants. He saw those green shirts, and he loved to come in. And how my dad met Elvis, he saw this young man looking in the window, and he said, young man, come on in, let me show you around. And this young man looked up, and he said, Mr. Lansky, I don't have any money, but one of these days I'm going to come in and buy you out. And my dad, Mr. Lansky, said, young man, you don't have to buy me out, just buy from me.
Lansky let young Elvis buy clothes on credit. He'd go on buying here for the rest of his life.
In my opinion, this is the most iconic Elvis jacket. If you're an Elvis fan, you know this jacket. This is Elvis's coat he wore in the movie Jailhouse Rock. Over my shoulders is a photo of me from the 50s. That's a young Elvis. If you notice those big ears, I finally grew into my ears, but I was probably 9 years old in that photo. Right here, we call this the Dorsey Brothers coat. This is one of the early coats Elvis wore on the Dorsey Brothers show. And if you notice this beautiful shirt with it, this is the outfit Elvis wore when he signed his contract with RCA Records.
I was with him when he bought a pink silk shirt because he wanted to be different. Well, see, the other kids thought he was weird and they made fun of him, but I knew what he was doing.
He wanted to stand out. He wanted to stand out. And importantly, I think, for Elvis, he was not restricted, it seems, by many of the rules of his society. He was able to transcend them because, in many ways, he was trying to find himself.
We had the senior class talent show, and I was a producer. And so there was 3 or 4 guys on the front row sitting next to me. The same guys who had been giving Elvis a hard time at school. They were making fun of his clothes, making fun of his sideburns, making fun of his hair. But when he won that talent show that night, they jumped up on the chairs and they were screaming like crazy. And I said, what's wrong with you guys? For 2 years you gave him a hard time, and now you say you love him, you play him, you for him, you're on his side. I said, well, man, GK, we didn't know he was going to be this good. And so things started changing.
After graduating from high school in 1953, Elvis began visiting a local recording studio where his voice was brought to the attention of the owner, Sam Phillips.
My name is Jerry Phillips, and my father was Sam Phillips, who discovered Elvis Presley.
Sam Phillips had already discovered some of the greatest blues singers in America, such as Howlin' Wolf and B.B. King, making him a magnet for aspiring singers in the region. Phillips owned one of the few studios in 8 southern states that opened its doors to black musicians.
I think his mission really was giving people that weren't ever going to have a chance, poor whites, poor blacks, a chance to do something. He saw all this poverty and he saw this unfairness in the race relations and felt the great music of the fields, you know, of these tremendously fabulous black artists. His mission really was to give those people an opportunity, and I think you could stop it right there and say that, and it was black and white, poor blacks, poor whites.
Phillips booked Elvis into the studio, along with guitarist Scotty Moore and bass player Bill Black. But the session did not go well and looked like being fruitless.
They were trying to do this song that Sam had. It was like a Dean Martin or Frankie Lane song, and it just wasn't Elvis's cup of tea. So Sam was going through his file to find another song. Elvis and him were just in the studio goofing around. So Sam opened the door to the control room. He said, what are you guys doing? Scotty said, well, Sam, we're just fooling around till you can find him another song. And Sam said, well, that fooling around sounds pretty dadgum good.
Well, that's all right, Mama. That's all right for you. That's all right, Mama. Just any way you do it, that's all right.
My dad brought the That's All Right Mama record home and played it and said that, I think I found what I've been looking for, and this is going to change our lives. He was really excited to share that with my brother and I and my mother.
Well, Mama, she done told me, Papa done told me too.
But the unique sound that made the record so exciting also posed a problem for Phillips when he tried to get airplay on the segregated radio stations of the day.
When my dad would take those records into a white radio station, they would say, man, this guy sounds too black, you know, too rhythm and bluesy, whatever. And then the black stations would say, nah, this guy sounds too white, you know. And they worked hard. They worked really hard to get anybody to even play the dang thing.
His breakthrough came with a maverick Memphis DJ called Dewey Phillips. Although Sam and Dewey were not related, they shared the same musical passion.
Dewey Phillips was the #1 disc jockey in Memphis at that time. He was a white guy, but he played African-American music. And he played That's All Right Mama. And the phones lit up. Kids started calling in. Man, play that song again by that Memphis boy.
The night that Elvis comes to the radio station in Memphis to play That's All Right Mama, the first thing that the DJ does is tell the audience the name of his high school, because the name of his high school tells a radio audience his race. You always need to know that. It's still the South.
Less than 2 months previously, the Supreme Court had ruled that segregated schools were illegal. The prospect of integration provoked violent outrage. And against this backdrop, Elvis's hybrid sound was not welcomed.
He told me stories about how him and Elvis, he took Elvis on some of these radio trips, you know, to meet these DJs, and some of them wouldn't even let Elvis use the bathroom. They didn't like him because of what he was doing. They thought he was, you know, ruining their daughters with this black music that he was, you know, promoting, and they thought Elvis was like, you know, just like the black dudes, man, you know, and they didn't want their daughters and stuff to be listening to that kind of stuff.
But Elvis's personal appearances were generating an extraordinary reaction.
Next thing you know, Sam had him booked on some little shows, and Elvis started making some noise, you know, doing pretty good. And there was an opening of a shopping center, and they had built a radio booth. They wanted me to play the music during the day. People could come and buy their clothes and visit the new shopping center. And so they'd booked Elvis for that night. And the girls every afternoon, they would come up and play that Elvis record, play that Elvis record. Elvis may come up here. And sure enough, here comes Elvis, and he winks at the girls and hugs them and signs autographs for them, you know. But I knew something's going to happen with this. He's too good.
His growing following earned him a weekly slot on one of the most popular country music shows on radio, the Louisiana Hayride. Listeners not only got to hear Elvis, but also the wild audience reaction he generated.
I'm DJ Fontana, and I was Elvis's drummer from 55 to 68. He was a good-looking guy. I mean, he was handsome. So when he walked out, man, it was like thunder roaring. And then he got to singing, it got worse. We knew it was coming. You could feel it. You're on stage, and you hear all those people screaming and hollering. And so we knew it was coming sooner or later. Sooner or later, he was going to break wide open.
As Elvis's popularity grew, more white radio stations played his music, despite its R&B influences, and it became clear that their young white listeners also wanted to hear black artists like Chuck Berry and Little Richard. It marked the gradual end of segregated airplay.
That's one of the things that I'm not sure everybody knows that Sam Phillips and Elvis Presley did, was bust down racial barriers. Like, I mean, they blew the hinges off of it, you know, as far as radio was concerned and exposure.
In August 1955, Elvis signed with a new manager, a canny country music promoter called Colonel Tom Parker. He would engineer Elvis's meteoric rise, starting by getting him a contract with America's biggest major label, RCA Victor. His first single for RCA in January 1956 thrust him into the new medium of television.
It's called Heartbreak Hotel.
Elvis's career was about to go into orbit.
Well, since my baby left me, well, I found a new place to dwell. Well, it's down at the end of lonely
Main Street at Heartbreak Hotel. I'll make you so lonely, baby. Well, I'm so lonely. I'll be so lonely I could die.
My dad saw him on that show. My dad said, "Oh my God, this guy is dynamite." And at that time, he knew the sky was the limit for Elvis.
For broken-hearted lovers to cry there in the gloom and be so.
Before then, he was just a young local guy doing a little traveling, singing. But after you saw him on national TV, that changed everybody's mind.
Heartbreak Hotel went straight to #1 and stayed there for 7 weeks.
They called it rock and roll, rockabilly, all kind of names. But I don't know if we were any of those.
If your baby leaves you,
Scotty was blues, Bill was country, and I played what I played, whatever that was. Or we were just playing like what we wanted to play. And somehow or another it worked out okay.
you'll be so lonely, baby. Well, you'll be lonely.
In 1956, Elvis would rack up 5 #1 singles and 2 #1 albums, occupying the top of the charts for a total of 37 weeks of the year.
You ain't nothing but a hound dog.
In July, Elvis's latest single, Hound Dog, became his 4th consecutive #1. A song originally recorded by blues singer Big Mama Thornton in 1952. The song's writers, Jerry Lieber and Mike Stoller, had mixed feelings about Elvis's cover version.
My name is Mike Stoller. I'm half of the songwriting team, Lieber and Stoller. Jerry came running up to me and said, "Mike, we got a smash hit." And I said, "You're kidding." He said, "No. Hound Dog." I said, "Big Mama Thornton?" He said, "No, some white kid named Elvis Presley." That's how I first heard of Elvis.
You ain't nothing but a hound dog. Been snooping around my door.
It was a little disappointing because it didn't have the feel that Big Mama's record had. The original song is a woman's song. It's a woman singing to a gigolo or a freeloader. And the version that Elvis finally did sounds like he's singing to a dog.
Well, they said you was high class. Well, that was just a lie.
However, as it sold about 7 million singles, I decided there must be some merit to it.
His version was not based on Big Mama Thornton's version. His version was based on Freddie Bell and the Bell Boys, who actually had done it in Las Vegas when Elvis appeared there the first time. I think in April of 1956. They were a lounge act.
You ain't nothing but a hound dog, crying all the time.
One of the things that often is used as a criticism is that Elvis stole music from African-American performers. In this particular case, the integrity of the song wasn't in question because he was almost verbatim the Freddie Bell version. It wasn't even Big Mama's version.
Elvis's stage concerts were marked by levels of hysteria that had never been seen before. And worse than that were Elvis's movements, quickly branded as lascivious and vulgar.
He was accused, of course, of being dirty, right? That had to do with a sexually suppressed white community. The fact that Elvis moving his hips created a furor, that indicates the suppression.
Well, first of all, you're in a puritanical society, and you're in a judgmental society. Respectable people, North and South, did not comport themselves in that fashion. Respectable people did not shake their booty. Respectable people definitely did not shake their crotch. And his hair was too long.
He told me how upset and crushed he was, that they thought that he was vulgar and the way he was moving. And he said, "I'm just feeling the music." And he said, "I'd never do that and embarrass my mom." And I said, "Elvis, Don't let anybody change you. You keep moving the way you're moving.
Rock and roll, not a hot, hot step, not a dungaree dart. I headed to the gym, to the sock hop ball. The jumping, the cats are going wild. The really, really send my day to ready to rock and roll.
I think Elvis knew exactly what he was doing. When he shook a leg and he saw someone in the audience starts squealing, he'd shake it a little bit more. For many people, that was liberating in terms of how the young women reacted and almost found their own selves and their own sexuality by what Elvis was doing on stage.
Elvis's sex appeal was about to hit Hollywood. Despite what his movie career would later become in the 60s, at this stage, he was seen as raw and rebellious, and a relatively unknown quantity.
I'm Dolores Hart, Mother Dolores Hart now, but then I starred in 2 films with Mr. Elvis Presley.
Today, she's a Benedictine nun. But in 1957, she was an 18-year-old actress making her screen debut alongside Elvis in Loving You.
I had no idea who he was or what he did. He was introduced, and I said, "How do you do, Mr. Presley?" And he said, "Miss Dolores, I'm very glad to know you." And then I made the stupidest remark. I said, "Well, you're in the film, what do you do?" And he said, "Oh, I sing."
Loving You brought Elvis's live stage act to the big screen for the very first time.
Follow him through the barnstorming days.
When I watched him on stage, he was riveting to observe. I couldn't take my eyes off him when he was singing. I had the feeling that he brought to the entertainment industry the maleness of sexuality, and he did it like a guy standing on a bed. I mean, you just felt he was electric. He was a lover in what he did, and he expressed it in his body.
Walking through a party in the county jail. The prison band was there and they began to wail. The band was jumping and the joint began to swing. You should have heard the knocked out jailbird sing that rock.
As a singing convict in Jailhouse Rock, he had critics calling him the next James Dean. It placed Elvis at his pinnacle.
Vince Everett, dynamically portrayed by Elvis Presley, was a tough...
Movie stardom, global fame and riches he could never have dreamed of. And he lavished those riches on his mother.
I met his mother. She began talking about how much she loved him, how much she appreciated what was happening, and she thanked me for being with him in the film. He adored her. He loved her. I mean, it was clear in the room. I mean, I could tell that they were like this.
He never bought a home for himself. Instead, he bought a bigger house to live in with his mother and father.
He buys a home in Memphis on Audubon Park Drive. The people there were outraged. You have all these fans that are coming in and they're disrupting the neighborhood. But they're also upset because Gladys Presley is hanging out clothes on the line in the backyard. Well, that's something that middle-class people in Memphis at this time apparently didn't do. She wants to raise chickens. Well, you don't raise chickens in a upscale middle-class neighborhood, but Gladys Presley wanted to raise chickens.
So he bought Graceland, a secluded mansion where the neighbors could never complain, because there weren't any. Wealth would never change Gladys, and she would never stop worrying about Elvis.
Elvis loved his mother to death. Whatever she said was rules. If she said, Elvis, we'd be traveling, we'd come home, he'd pick up a girl from Hollywood, like Natalie Wood, who had been a big star, and other girls, and Miss Presley would say, Elvis, next morning she'd say, Elvis, that girl you brought home from Hollywood, I don't think she's your type. I think you ought to send her back to Hollywood. She'd be gone back to Hollywood. She'd pull me aside and she'd say, George, she said, you watch out for my son. I love him, he loves me. Make sure nothing goes crazy.
Elvis would look back on 1958 as the summit of his career. But Colonel Parker, the manager who'd steered his path, insisted on total control, even at the expense of some of Elvis's closest collaborators, including the writing team who'd written more hits for Elvis than anyone else, Lieber and Stoller.
You know, we got in a fight with the Colonel. Elvis said to me, and I remember it was a Friday afternoon, he said, Mike, I want you and Jerry to write me a real pretty ballad. You know, you got it. I called Jerry. Saturday we wrote a song. I got the demo and I handed it to Elvis. And he loved it. And the song was Don't. And he recorded it, but nevertheless it caused this tremendous uproar because I had dared to present a song to Elvis directly without going through the proper channels. The Colonel said, if you ever dare try to interfere in the career of Elvis Presley, you will never work again in Hollywood, New York, London, or anywhere. And I said, tell him to go himself. And Jerry repeated. He said, Mike said. And that kind of ended our relationship.
Elvis's next movie, King Creole, gave him the finest dramatic role of his career as a singing street hustler.
There were to be many women in Danny's young life.
His co-star was Dolores Hart.
Nellie, who knew too little about love.
I've never been to a place like this before. But I want to see you again.
At that time, we couldn't go down on the street because it was just packed with kids. We got into the car to leave, and they could hardly move because they were just swarming to try to get near him. I never imagined how anybody could live through that way. And what's amazing to me is it never stopped. It never stopped.
But right at the peak of Elvis mania, the life of the man dubbed the atomic-powered singer was about to undergo its greatest transition. At the height of his success, Elvis was drafted into the US Army for 2 years of national service. On March 24, 1958, Elvis reported for his induction. Amongst the 11 other recruits was Bill Norville.
I met Elvis down here in Memphis. We were sworn in the same day.
I, Elvis Presley.
Elvis was teary that he was leaving his mother. He loved his mother. And I think she was really worried about him going in the Army, too, because she was crying when we got on the bus to go to Fort Chaffee.
While in the Army in 1958, Elvis Presley will earn nearly $2 million. Otherwise, he will be just like any other soldier. Almost.
Elvis had barely finished basic training when the event took place that would eclipse everything else in his Army career: the sudden death of his mother from heart failure.
I went to the airport with his daddy to pick him up at the airport. Immediately we went to the hospital. We went in the next room and we sat with Elvis. Elvis was in there crying. Everybody was crying, man. We were trying to console Elvis, and he kept saying, George, I did this all for my mama. she wanted me to be a big star, and she wanted nice clothes and wanted cars and nice home. So I did it for my mother. Now she's gone. What am I going to do?
He couldn't really grasp it, you know. I guess 'cause, you know, he was a twin, and I guess she really was real, you know, affectionate to him because she'd already lost one child.
He adored her. He loved her. So when I heard that she died, I knew he was going through tortures of hell.
Oh, they was real close. They was real close. Yeah, he took it real hard. He never got over that. He never got over that.
Just 10 days after his mother's funeral, Elvis had to return to active service.
Things had calmed down, and Elvis knew he had to go back to the Army, and he didn't want to go, but he went anyway. And I said, Elvis, is it real tough? He said, yeah, but I'm sticking it out. He said, I'm serving my country. If I don't, the people are going to think bad of me, and I love America. He said, so I got to stick out the 2 years.
Assigned to the 3rd Armored Division, Elvis's unit was posted to Germany.
In the 6 months that I've been in the Army, I've learned quite a bit.
Well, do you miss the hysterical females, the adulation you got wherever you went?
Yes, sir.
I'm sure you don't get that in the barracks. You do miss that,
miss it.
even those who grab for your clothes and your hair and everything?
Because that is my greatest love, like I said, entertaining people and you know, and I really miss it.
When Elvis disembarked in Germany, he was entering the front line of America's Cold War with the Soviet Union. The nuclear arms race between the two superpowers was escalating, and Germany was split in two by the conflict. With East Germany occupied by Soviet troops, America's army on the Rhine was a thin green line protecting West Germany against the ever-present threat of communist invasion.
We had the Cold War going on. We had a serious situation. The Russians had taken over Poland and then taken over Czechoslovakia, and we used to go pull border guard on Czechoslovakia. That's what we was over for, to stop the Russians if they ever come across the border. We carried fully loaded ammunition. We carried loaded pistols. And we didn't know when we went out if we was going to be coming back.
But in March 1960, Elvis finally did come back, having completed his national service. On his first day back at Graceland, he seemed keen to make it clear that his days of youthful rebellion were behind him.
Do you have any advice for the boys your age who are now going to have to put in a certain amount of duty in the service?
Well, the only thing I could say is to play it straight and to do your best, because you can't fight them.
He was more mature. He was more conscious of what was happening in the world at that time. He was the same old Elvis, but he was a lot mature, more mature.
But could he rebuild his career after 2 long years away? That was the question on everyone's lips, including his own.
He was worried about it. He was worried about himself. Would he come back and be the same guy or the same artist that he was before? And we kept saying, Elvis, don't worry about it. You'll do good. You always do.
Elvis took comfort from the fact that the Colonel had a plan, trading on his army service to rebrand Elvis as a symbol of mainstream American values, patriotic, wholesome, and clean-cut. The subversive rebel of song who enlisted in 1958 was returning in 1960 as the boy next door in uniform. Stage 1 of Elvis's rehabilitation into show business was an appearance on the Frank Sinatra Show.
We work in the same way, only in different areas. Love me tender, love me sweet, never let me go.
Sinatra made Love Me Tender sound bland. Elvis made Witchcraft sound like his own.
In my hair, let's come hither stare. Let's strips my conscience bare, it's witchcraft. Love me tender.
At this point, Elvis had out-Sinatra'd Sinatra. It was a moment that set the tone for Elvis's decade.
I love you, and I always will. It's now or never. Come hold me tight.
The toned-down, tamer Elvis was a success. His first 4 singles after leaving the army were what we'd now call power ballads. All of them were #1 hits.
My love won't wait.
Then, in 1961, Elvis made Blue Hawaii, the film that ruined him.
Away from the beach, cause you button down your hair, turn on the music and we'll get somewhere. Dance, dance, dance till your toes get tan.
This was the daddy of all Elvis movies, a comedy musical packed with 14 songs, and it was a box office sensation, with the accompanying soundtrack spending 20 weeks at the top of the album charts. Blue Hawaii clinched the formula for the rest of Elvis's film career.
Having seen a few of his scripts and having written some songs myself for some of those movies, it was pretty much Elvis meets girl, Elvis sings. Elvis meets girl's ex-boyfriend, Elvis fights. And Elvis gets back with girl, Elvis sings.
It was a formula that kept on working. The only real variation, apart from the locations, was the quantity of girls. Above all, the movies were vehicles for a conveyor belt of chart-topping hits like Return to Sender.
I gave a letter to the postman. He put it in his sack. Bright and early next morning, he brought my letter.
My name is Larry Geller. I was Elvis's personal hairstylist. I made 11 movies with Elvis. And every movie that we made, I altered his hair just a little bit. In one movie, I made his sideburns a little longer. Another, the pompadour fell on this side a little bit. On this side, this came up a little. I always made it just to fit the character. Even though the character was the same, I had to do something. Who gave a damn about the movies? They wanted to see Elvis. He's the biggest star that ever lived. Ever. Who sold more records and albums than Elvis Presley? The highest paid actor in Hollywood? Who's the most photographed person ever? Elvis Presley.
The new happy-go-lucky Elvis image also captured the spirit of the times. It was an era of unparalleled prosperity and progress in America, of Martin Luther King's dream and JFK's new frontier. An idyllic time of optimism before the rot set in. The Colonel's asking price for his superstar was now $1 million per film, making Elvis the highest paid actor in the history of Hollywood. For the rest of the decade, Elvis would average 3 movies a year. There was just one problem. Elvis hated making them.
Elvis said to me, he said, look, I want you to know something. Those movies that are embarrassing the hell out of me, what am I doing, man? I'm making these teeny bopper movies, one after another. It's the same old flick. All they do is change the character's name. I'm making the same movie over and over and over again.
No room to rumble in a sports car.
And there was another problem. The songs were becoming awful. Titles like No Room to Rumble in a Sports Car and Queenie Wahini's Papaya spoke for themselves. The songs were as bad as the titles.
Queenie Wahini's papaya rates higher than pineapple, pumpkin, or poi.
Most of the soundtrack recordings took place at RCA Studio B in Nashville, Tennessee, where Elvis assembled some of the finest musicians of the era to record some of the worst songs ever written.
The songs were bad, and we knew it. He knew it. We couldn't do nothing about it, so we had to do the best we could. That's what he told us. He said, boy, these songs are no good, but do the best you can with them.
Charlie McCoy had just finished working on Bob Dylan's Blonde on Blonde album when he was booked with Elvis for one of his worst soundtrack albums, Harum Scarum.
I must say I was disappointed in the songs for Harum Scarum, as were everyone else, as was Elvis.
Does anything stand out in your mind as being particularly bad?
To be honest, I don't remember the music from Harum Scarum. Frankie and Johnny I remember because I had a big solo in Frankie and Johnny.
Is that the film that included the track Petunia, the Gardener's Daughter?
Yes, I think so. Yeah, I know. Same thought we had.
I love Petunia, the gardener's daughter.
What was the worst song you ever played on with Elvis?
Oh, shoot. There's so many of them, I can't keep up with them.
I'm as daffy as a daffodil. I long to.
But Elvis's song choices were surprisingly limited because the Colonel insisted that Elvis only record material that he controlled the publishing rights to.
He was being given songs from the song mill that Colonel Parker was an associate of, and they didn't care which ones he did as long as he did a certain number.
In 1965, for the very first time in Elvis's career, he went a whole year without a #1 record. His sales were starting to slump dramatically. America was undergoing rapid change by the mid-60s, thrown into turmoil by the assassination of JFK, the Vietnam War, and endless protests on the streets. And musically, a revolution had happened when the Beatles invaded America, making Elvis seem increasingly outdated and irrelevant.
I don't think he changed significantly, but I think, the Beatles had crashed the party, so to speak, the English invasion. And I do think that Elvis was a little worried about, whether his career might be over.
The Beatles' concert tours of the US mirrored the impact Elvis had enjoyed in the 1950s, only more so. After a personal audience with Muhammad Ali, the Beatles went to meet the man they'd rendered a rock and roll relic.
Everyone's introduced, and the four Beatles, John, Paul, George, and Ringo, sit on the floor like disciples in front of Elvis, and they're all cross-legged, and they're all like this. They're staring at Elvis. And all of a sudden Elvis said, hey, you guys are not going to talk to me. I'm going to my bedroom. And everyone laughed, and it broke the ice. And all of a sudden John said, Elvis, can I play the guitar? And Paul said, Elvis, can I play? And Elvis said, yeah, man. Elvis turns around, picks up his Martin, and they start jamming. John started singing Memphis, Tennessee. And they sang Johnny Be Good and one or two others. And I'm sitting there. I can't believe, what? Elvis, Paul, John. I'm thinking, son of a bitch. I can't believe this. This is history. This is beyond history. Now, Colonel Parker was a control freak. He wouldn't allow even one photograph to be taken, let alone that music being recorded. So it's in my memory. That's it.
In the wake of the Beatles' visit, Elvis's career continued to plummet. His movies stopped making money, and his songs stopped making the charts. Then during 1967, the lowest achieving year of his career, the unthinkable happened.
Elvis Presley weds Priscilla Ann Boldull, and one of America's richest teenage singing idols promises to love, honor, and obey.
At the beginning of 1968, Elvis and Priscilla's daughter, Lisa Marie, was born. With his last soundtrack album peaking at number 82 in the charts, Elvis's career was facing make or break as he began filming his 28th movie.
My name is Celeste Yarnell, and I co-starred with Elvis in Live a Little, Love a Little.
The production got off to a promising start when Elvis discovered she'd recently appeared in one of his favorite TV shows.
He gave me the biggest hug, and he said, I just couldn't wait to meet you. I knew you were coming, and I know you from Star Trek. Elvis was a Star Trek fan. He even had a horse named Star Trek. We became very, very dear friends and very close very quickly. Here's this great opportunity that I'm working with Elvis Presley, and I'm at MGM, and I'm, doing this fun, wonderful movie. And here, this tragedy is unfolding.
While they were filming, news reached the set that Martin Luther King had been shot dead in Elvis's hometown of Memphis, gunned down by a sniper on the balcony of the Lorraine Motel, just a stone's throw from Beale Street, where Elvis used to hang out as a teenager.
Elvis's reaction to the assassination of MLK was huge. He was devastated. Elvis said to me, Celeste, this is where I grew up. These are my people. This is my community. And look what's happened, and I can't do anything about it. It was coming up on lunchtime, and he said, Celeste, the MLK funeral is going to be on, and I want to watch it with you. I thought, oh boy. So we went, to his dressing room, and we ordered lunch there. And the funeral was on, and Elvis just said, I can't take it. And he stood up, a cappella, and sang Amazing Grace. Performance of a lifetime that nobody got to see but me. It's like, just flashback, and I'm there. It was, to see Elvis Presley just break down after that. He sang the song, and then he sobbed in my arms. Elvis was aghast at how anything like this could happen in America.
While he was filming, Elvis was also preparing to appear on a TV special, for which a song had been composed that gave vent to his feelings.
There must be lights burning brighter somewhere.
My name is Steve Binder. I'm probably professionally best known as the producer and director of the Elvis Presley special.
Just before Elvis recorded the song, another tragic event had rocked America.
We happened to be together one night at my offices when Bobby Kennedy was assassinated. And then we spent the whole evening until maybe 3, 4 in the morning talking about what's going on in America. What are all these assassinations about? What's happening to our country? I think there'd be a lot of rednecks in America shocked about how liberal Elvis really was.
If I can dream of a better land where all my brothers walk hand in hand, tell me why, oh why can't my dream come true?
Later known as the Comeback Special, this would be the watershed moment of Elvis's career, and it came about because the Colonel's movie deals had dried up. So instead, he'd landed a TV deal for a Christmas music special.
My name is Bones Howe, and I was a co-producer of the Elvis Comeback Special.
The Colonel had set his heart on a traditional festive show full of cozy Christmas carols, but Binder and Howe planned something very different.
One of the things that I thought was important was, and Steve and I talked about this, we thought the music would be the thing that would make him feel, get the old feel going again.
I knew I didn't want to do a Christmas show of just having an artist sing, sleigh bells and I'll Be Home for Christmas and things like that.
A meeting with Elvis would now decide the show's fate.
When we first met, one of the first things he asked me, he said, "What do you think of my career?" Well, I was in the music business at the time with Bones. And I said, "Elvis, truthfully, I think your career's in the toilet. He looked at me for a second in shock, and then he started laughing out loud. And he said, finally, somebody's leveling with me.
Instead of the Colonel's traditional Christmas theme, the show was populated with new songs and edgy themes. But the core of the show was to be an acoustic jam session on a small stage in front of a live studio audience. It was a daring proposition. Elvis had not performed live for over 7 years.
Elvis was so worried that he'd lost his fan base. It's something he talked about all the time. And he would turn to me and he'd say, Celeste, do you think they'll really still remember me? There was a lot of fear coming from him at that time as to whether he still had it.
On the day of recording, Elvis dropped a bombshell.
I go to the makeup room, and he said, Steve, I hate to do this to you, but I've changed my mind. I said, what do you mean you changed your mind? He said, I can't do it. I can't go out there. I could tell he was scared to death. He was panicked and decided that he wasn't going to do it.
The idea of getting up on stage again with a live audience, he hadn't been in that position for years. And he didn't know if they were going to laugh at him or throw things at him.
I turned my back on Elvis and I said, you've got to go out there. I left the room, not looking at him, not waiting for a response. I head to the control booth, not knowing whether he's going to come out or not. All of a sudden, on one of my camera's monitors, I see him walking up to the stage.
Elvis was about to dig deep and go back to his roots.
Very first thing was an old rhythm and blues type song. And if I fall asleep here, just give. There's an old rhythm and blues type song called "That's All Right, Little Mama," and we only had 2 or 3 instruments at the time. And we had a guitar, a bass, and another guitar, and it went like this. Well, that's all right, Mama. That's all right with you. That's all right, Mama. Just any way you do.
He started singing. In 2 seconds, he had them all, in the palm of his hand, and he knew it. And it was the old Elvis back again.
Well, Mama, she done told me. Papa done told me too. Son, that gal you fooling, where she ain't no good for you. That's all right. That's all right. That's all right, now, Mama. Anyway you do.
After years of movie hype, here was a man rediscovering himself in the simplest of settings. Drummer DJ Fontana didn't even have space for a drum kit.
I had a box and a pair of sticks, and that's what I beat on. He was nervous. He didn't want to go out there and jeopardize his voice and everything else. But he did it and did a good job. And that brought him back to life again.
I'm ecstatic. I mean, it was like looking through a door keyhole and you're not supposed to see what's going on inside. And I'm thinking, this is phenomenal.
What?
Dead serious, Mom.
Nobody had ever seen Elvis Presley as Elvis Presley. They'd only seen this public relations, image.
Are you sorry we drifted?
Lip still does that, man,
He did 2 hours. At the end, I was laughing like vaudeville. Let's get the hook, and get him off the stage. He was having such a ball.
I wonder if you're on somebody.
Are you sorry we drifted?
With the show recorded, there was, however, a major problem. The Colonel, angry at having been defied, was refusing to allow the show to be broadcast.
He said, it's been called, very serious, it's been called to my attention that you've not scheduled any Christmas songs in the show. Is that true? And I said, yeah, it's true. And he said, well, we're not going to do the show unless you have a Christmas song in it. And then I remembered that Elvis had kind of improvised, though I'd never told him to do it, to sing Blue Christmas, or at least a short version of Blue Christmas.
My favorite Christmas song of all the ones I've recorded.
I'll have a blue Christmas without you.
Once NBC heard that I had this Blue Christmas song in the improv, they turned to the Colonel and said, "Colonel, if we put that in, will that satisfy you?" And they can broadcast the show. And he said yes.
And when those snowflakes.
You could kind of hear him goofing around and laughing, and at one point saying, "Sing it dirty, Elvis, sing it dirty."
You'll be doing all right with your grandmother white. But I have a blue, 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 blue Christmas.
Aired in December 1968, the TV special did the seemingly impossible. It resurrected Elvis's career. Undoing the damage inflicted by 8 years of movie soundtracks, it restored not only his record sales, but more importantly, his credibility.
What he told me is that after we finished the special, I'm never going to sing a song again that I don't believe in, and I'm never going to make a movie that I don't like the script. I don't think anybody to this day has made a comeback like him, ever.
It's shocking to think that at the moment of his greatest triumph, clad in black and seemingly with the world at his feet, Elvis had only 9 years left to live.
The TV special in '68 was a rebellion. He went out, he took the challenges, he accepted them, and he triumphed. And I think that's the thing, is that is the moment at which the adult Elvis is seen kind of whole. As whole as he got. And then it's back to paying the bills. You know, it's just about like that.
Finally free of his film obligations, Elvis could return to the thing he loved best, live concerts. Having not toured since before he entered the army in 1958, he was about to return to the stage. In Las Vegas, a new hotel was opening. The Hilton International was the largest hotel ever built, and the Colonel had signed him up to perform 2 shows a day for 4 weeks for a record-breaking fee of $100,000 a week.
Went to the International Hotel, I think it was 1969 in Vegas, to open out there. But he was still worried about it because he padded the audience with, he called us, my father, and said, "Look, I want you guys to come out, you know, be in the audience." And a lot of his friends were in the audience because he really didn't know exactly how he was going to be accepted.
The publicity was amazing, the PR. That town was, it was almost like a heavyweight championship. You know, Las Vegas transformed when there was a heavyweight championship. People dressed differently and a different kind of crowd showed up. This was where Elvis had always been an artist of the people and the little guy and all that. All of a sudden it was, you know, it was a tough ticket and you had to have some cash to get in there and get a good seat.
Elvis had previously played live with a 3-piece band. But now he'd be backed by a completely new lineup of 6 musicians and 9 backing singers, along with a 30-piece orchestra.
Elvis was worried. He was worried whether this was going to really be great or not. And my dad said, "Well, Elvis, when you play with a big band like that, you make sure that rhythm section's right in there behind you. You keep that rhythm section right up your ass." Basically what he told him, you know. And he did.
11 days after the first man set foot on the moon, Elvis stepped out on the stage for his first show in Vegas.
I just remember he came backing out from the curtain with his band playing, and the place just went crazy. And from that point on, you know, he had everybody.
Oh, see, easy rider. Oh, see what you have done.
I don't even know how to describe it. These are grown women now, as well as teenagers. But it was like, you know, the zombie movie and everybody's crawling all over to get to the that's what it was like. It was these women were like totally changed from the persona that walked through the door into these desperately wanting to get a kiss or touch him.
My name is Dick Grobe. I was Elvis Presley's bodyguard, chief of security for over 10 years. When he played the Hilton here, you could almost watch women from the very back start running down the aisle, and they would jump on the tables right at the end and run down the length of the table to jump on the stage to try to get to Elvis.
Elvis's Vegas performance became legendary. His 56 shows in 28 days smashed the world record for concert attendance.
He was every bit as good as when I worked with him on the special. He was phenomenal. He had this huge orchestra. He was having the time of his life. I mean, it was electric moment where the audience and the artist are fused into one. I then went to try and see him backstage to congratulate him, and I hadn't seen him in a year or so, and I was not allowed to see him. I went to the artist entrance, and I was told he was unavailable, and after I announced myself. So I figured, you know, that's the way it is, that's fine.
What are you looking at right now?
In January 1970, Elvis returned to Las Vegas for his second month-long booking, wearing the first of the one-piece jumpsuits that would become his trademark.
Some of y'all never been down south too much. I'm gonna tell you a little story so you'll understand what I'm talking about. Down there we have a plant that grows out in the woods and the fields. And it looks something like a turnip green. And everybody calls it poke salad. And that's poke salad.
I have to give him a lot of credit for reinventing himself, you know. I saw those Vegas shows and they were, I mean, I gotta say they were good. Some of the jumpsuits I thought were pretty cool, you know what I mean? I thought he looked pretty good. I don't see how you could be more successful in a jumpsuit than he was.
And we'd be seeing a lot more of those jumpsuits because the Colonel secured an extraordinary deal, even by Elvis standards. $1 million contract to play Vegas for 2 months a year, every year, leaving the rest of the year free for concert tours across America. Because the public couldn't get enough of Elvis in a jumpsuit. Soon he'd be playing up to 167 concerts a year, and squeezing in studio sessions too.
I'm Norbert Putnam. I played bass on 120 tracks with the greatest artist in the world, Elvis Presley.
That summer, Putnam joined Elvis for the most prolific recording session of his career. In just 5 nights, Elvis would record 35 tracks, enough material for 3 albums and 6 singles.
Presley was, first of all, his physique. It was 1970, he was in flawless physical condition. And when he started, he was so focused.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Patch It Up, Baby. There's a killer bass part on Patch It Up, Baby.
We got to patch it up, baby, before we fall apart at the seams.
He would learn that song in 2 or 3 takes. We'd literally play it through one time for the engineer. And Elvis would say, let's do it. Come on, guys. And then I'd watch him start to sort of, he's taking deep breaths. It's almost like an athlete, like, give me the ball, I'll score. And he's pumping, he's saying, guys, we're gonna nail this first take, come on. He was intense, okay? And it was like, hang on. And we're playing our parts and we're following his emotion, and it's a tremendous emotion. The first time through, he's phenomenal. And he just heard this song for the first time 10 minutes ago.
But aged just 35, Elvis had reached a summit he would never occupy again. In September, he was back in Vegas, and showing the first signs that 2 shows a day for 4 weeks straight was not the creative challenge he needed.
I went back to see him in 1970, a year later, and I knew it was over. I sat there in the audience. The audience didn't know it, but I could tell he was now performing to the musicians behind him and not the audience in front of him. So I knew he was bored. I was so disappointed for him.
Perhaps the realization was dawning that he would be performing 8 weeks a year in Las Vegas for the rest of his life, selling his soul in Sin City. Elvis had set a new benchmark for money-making in the world capital of greed, and it would never let him go. Ticket sales alone were generating nearly $500,000 a week, multiplied many times over by the cash spent on hotel rooms, food, drink, and of course, gambling. "56 shows in Vegas, 1 day off, then a 6-city tour, 3 weeks off, and then an 8-city tour, and so on, and so on." No one took much notice of the signs of erratic behavior, like buying $20,000 worth of guns in 3 days, or even the time in December when he turned up at the White House unannounced to see President Richard Nixon. Nor was anyone alarmed when he produced a Colt 45 with silver bullets in the Oval Office and presented them as a gift. After all, he was Elvis. So when he asked for a Federal Bureau of Narcotics badge, Nixon smiled and obliged.
He became a caricature of himself. Yes, he could still sing, he sure could, but he became a caricature of himself on the Vegas stage with all the scarves and tossing them out to the sweaty scarves to the girls in the audience. And even, making fun of himself. He could still sing, and people still, they loved him, and those of us who remembered him when he was the original Elvis, remember him fondly, and I guess that's why, in spite of what to me was demeaning on the Vegas stage, he still remains great.
Everything that followed blurred into a downward spiral of endless touring, perpetual Vegas shows, ill health, depression, and pills. His descent was rapid. When his marriage broke down, Elvis binged on more concert bookings. Perhaps, like the pills and the food, they'd help him forget. And when he recorded new songs once or twice a year, the session musicians were alarmed by the change in his appearance.
Now watch him go from being in flawless physical condition to starting to gain a little weight. In '73, when he came into Stax Studio, he was wearing one of those jogging outfits that were popular back in those days, big bulky things. And he was a little puffy up here, And he just didn't seem to be as sharp mentally as he had been in the past, as focused. And then with each passing year, he was gaining weight.
Maybe I didn't treat you quite as good as I should have.
Vegas Elvis became synonymous with maudlin, sentimental ballads about failed relationships, emotional pain and regret. But wherever he went, the demand for tickets only grew. In many ways, the spectre of Elvis in decline was perfect for the times. America's national esteem had been battered by defeat in Vietnam, the scandal of Watergate, unemployment and inflation. 70s America, like Elvis, was feeling a little sorry for itself, and Elvis provided the musical comfort food for the decade. In the middle of the worst economic recession since the 1930s, every show Elvis played was sold out.
His joy was performing for people. Unfortunately, he was like so many of us, he doesn't want to admit that he's incapable. And he would get sick. He would have constipation terribly, you know. And then the reverse of constipation would come in there too. So he would get sick on things and he'd go out on tour, and that necessarily caused some cancellations and things.
The spirit was willing, but increasingly, the performer was weak. By 1975, he would cancel a quarter of all his bookings. When Elvis could no longer be persuaded to go to the recording studio, RCA took the studio to him. Sound equipment was installed at Graceland. Elvis's final 2 albums were recorded from the comfort of his living room.
When he came downstairs, I hardly recognized Elvis Presley. He appeared to me to be 40 pounds, 50 pounds overweight, okay? Puffy face, shallow complexion. And I remember thinking, someone has to do something. Someone needs to look at this man. He's not healthy. I just thought perhaps it was obesity, but we now know it was much more than that. It was obesity along with a ton of pharmaceuticals that he could obtain from a lot of different people.
Yet he still toured relentlessly, right up until 6 weeks before his death, despite his ailing condition.
He was getting puffy from his illness and from his lifestyle. Constantly working, and he wouldn't stop, and he wouldn't stop taking the pills and his eating habits, and he was just tired. He was drained. And he looks at me and he said, "Larry, I know what my fans probably think, that I'm just plain fat. And the truth of the matter is, I'm embarrassed to go out there tonight. But you know what? I'm going to go out there, and I'm going to give them everything I've got, if it's the last thing I do." That's all he cared about.
On August 16th, 1977, Elvis was due to set off on another tour, 10 cities in 12 days. But at 2:33 that afternoon, an ambulance arrived at Graceland.
I had been with him until 5:30 that morning. We had talked, and then I went home. I'd just gotten up. I was starting to pack when I got the call that he was on his way to the hospital. And I went down to the hospital, and I was there when they finally said, "No, there's nothing we can do." And they pronounced him.
Good evening. Elvis Presley died today. He was 42. Apparently it was a heart attack.
I turned on the radio, and I just sat there and cried like a baby. I felt so guilty. First feeling I had, besides great remorse, was guilt. That I hadn't done anything. And then, why didn't somebody do something?
I had sublet my apartment to a guy, and I went up to get my mail, and he said, "Your secretary called, and I don't know why you'd be interested particularly, but she said to tell you that Elvis died." And it was like my knees almost buckled. I couldn't believe it.
Elvis's father, Vernon, asked Larry Geller to go to the morgue as soon as the autopsy was complete to help prepare Elvis for the funeral.
Elvis is lying on a table, with a sheet up to here, and I didn't accept it. I thought, no, this is not real. I see the incision marks on his body, and I know that there's a cult, several cults that Elvis is still alive, and it was all planned. And it's ridiculous and it's insensitive for people to. I had to sit there and I had to take care of Elvis. We know that Elvis Presley died. I know it for sure. I had to work on him.
Within hours of Elvis's death being reported, thousands began to gather outside the gates of Graceland.
We had anywhere from 250 to 300,000 people out there. The weather was terrible. It was hot. It was humid. People were dropping. Ultimately, I made the decision that we would bring people who were injured or sick from the heat and that in and lay them on the ground by the gate. And we had first aid people down there, ambulances down there. We eventually had to call out the Air Force National Guard unit for the people outside. That was the biggest problem, is the crowd control.
After the funeral, a few other people went to the back room where Elvis's body was in a casket, and the funeral director said, I've got to close it now, and I made a decision. I wanted to be the last person to touch Elvis. And I'm standing right next to Vernon, and I put my hand in on Elvis's forehead. And I said something. I closed my eyes real quick and said something privately. And I knew the lid was coming down, and I put my hand out. And that's the way it is.
I don't remember where I was or what my reaction is. I do know that when the colonel heard that Elvis died, everybody assumed he was rushing to Memphis. He headed to New York to have a meeting with RCA to tell him to press a lot more records, and then went to Memphis for the funeral.
I remember the quote from the colonel. It was in the papers that Elvis is going to be bigger than ever now. It was ugly, I thought. True as it may have been.
The death of Elvis is not the end of this story. In merchandising terms, it's only the beginning. For as soon as Elvis had passed away, he was worth even more money than he'd ever been alive. Elvis has sold 3 times as many records since his death as he did in his lifetime, the only singer totaling over 1 billion sales. His hometown of Memphis has become a virtual Elvis shrine.
It's like the clock stopped in 1977. A lot of us are benefiting from his death. I don't know how many millions and millions of dollars a year, but people from all over the world come to Memphis. They want to talk to people that knew Elvis. They want to walk on the streets that Elvis walked on. They want to shop in the stores Elvis shopped in. Elvis is still our king around here.
But dead Elvis is far more than a tourist attraction. Most remarkable of all is his resurgent presence in the pop charts decades after his death. In 2002, Dutch DJ Junkie XL's inspired remix transformed the 35-year-old Elvis song into an unlikely #1 hit.
I suddenly went up street cred in my kids' eyes. They said, all the kids at school are singing that. Are you kidding? You wrote that? I said, yeah, I did. Even after his death, he never lost his gleam. I'm so grateful and so thankful that he did my stuff. I wish he was still around. I'd like to shake his hand.
But perhaps the strangest of all has been the phenomenon of Dead Elvis's live concerts. Las Vegas fittingly led the way with the Cirque du Soleil's Viva Elvis, a reimagining of his music using performance footage. It's a format that enabled his former backing band to go on the road, performing live music in front of Elvis singing on a giant screen. Yes, even in death, Elvis is still on tour.
That traveling show where they've got the picture of him and the live orchestra, his whole band's playing to that, I've been to that twice, and I mean, you get so mesmerized that you think Elvis is still alive. And it sells out to FedEx Forum in Memphis. I mean, these big arenas. He's dead. He's been dead since 1977. But it's packed out, man. Packed out. So I don't know how you can explain that kind of hold that he had on people. Still has it.
Sometimes it seems that Elvis is all around us. In 1977, there were 170 Elvis impersonators in the world. Today, there are 85,000. At this rate, by 2040, almost 1 in 10 of us will be Elvis. Kate Moss has already become Elvis by way of promoting yet another reinvention.
When no one else can understand me.
Teaming Elvis up with the Royal Philharmonic Orchestra gave him yet another chart-topping album in 2015, plus his very first #1 on the US classical chart.
I was just fortunate enough to be over in London at the O2 when they had that Elvis thing with the Royal Philharmonic there. And I'm in this arena and I'm looking around and there are 18,500 people in there to see Elvis, who's been dead for 40 years almost. And they're all applauding, they're all cheering. Now, why is that? Because of his music, his ability, the life he lived. That's the Elvis mystique.
That's the wonder.
But the real wonder of Elvis is the way he's become a shared cultural reference point across the generations.
It's great-grandparents, grandparents, parents, their children, and grandchildren. It crosses all lines, all nationalities. He's just special. It's, you can't define it. It's charisma and beyond charisma.
Once a year, there's a candlelight vigil the night that Elvis passed, August 16th. They come from all around the world. Who else on planet Earth has a candlelight vigil? I mean, we're talking about something else here.
When he died, Elvis's estimated wealth was less than $5 million. Today, his estate generates more than $50 million a year. He's worth more than Frank Sinatra, John Lennon, and David Bowie combined.
Elvis never got really what you'd call rich, but he certainly, his heir, Lisa Marie and Priscilla, and they've made a bloody fortune since he died.
Well, the big mistake is to reduce his life to the money he made and to the fame he acquired. He was a real person, and that's what we're losing. It was a tragedy, but it was a success. And Shakespearean indeed. Shakespearean indeed.
Perhaps in our postmodern world, Elvis is ultimately the ideal celebrity, a timeless icon who can never get old. We can all aspire to his rags to riches rise and empathize with his tragic fall from grace. Maybe there's a little bit of Elvis in all of us.